Welcome to this explainer on the first city. Now, if you're looking for a way to completely transform how 6th grade social studies is taught, this is it. It's a really fascinating $19 three-day mini-mission. Think about it. Instead of just having students memorize a dry list of dates and ancient maps, it actually drops them directly into the shoes of ancient advisors who have to build a civilization completely from scratch. The whole thing really hinges on this one brilliant core philosophy. Found a civilization where the geography, not the view, says to. I mean, what a fantastic dramatic hook for a middle schooler, right? It immediately sets the stakes. It tells them, hey, your people's survival doesn't depend on how pretty your city looks. It depends entirely on your ability to analyze hard geographic evidence.
So, here is our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with day 1, the site. Then, day 2, the flood. After that, day 3, trade routes. And we'll wrap up with assessing geographic reasoning.
What's especially great here is how neatly this overarching setup is packaged for educators. For just $19, teachers get a complete 3-class period group format. Over those 3 days, students break into teams of 3 or 4 and have to seriously weigh what a civilization actually needs to survive and grow. It's basically a gold standard mini-lesson built on what they call the patience framework, which is all about prioritizing actual geographic evidence over whatever just happens to be the most impressive-looking choice.
All right, let's kick things off with day 1, the site. This is all about choosing survival over aesthetics.
Right out of the gate, the simulation plunges students into their first major dilemma. Your people are wandering, and they desperately need a permanent home. But, as we know, a city isn't just a place to sleep. To actually survive, it absolutely requires 3 crucial elements. They need reliable water, farmland to feed the population, and a viable way to trade and travel.
And this brilliantly sets up the conflict. The kids get 3 scouted locations: a rocky hilltop, a river plain, and a deep forest. Now, you know you're always going to have that one enthusiastic 6th grader who desperately wants to pick the dramatic hilltop because of the amazing views and defensive position. But the geographic data tells a totally different story. The rocky hilltop has absolutely no nearby water, the soil is terrible, and it's incredibly hard to reach. I mean, you simply can't drink a beautiful view, right?
So when we look at the teacher's answer key, the smart, evidence-based choice is undeniably Site B, the river plain. It's literally the only site that meets all 3 criteria. It gives them reliable water, rich soil for farming, and easy river travel for trade. If they built on that grand hilltop, the city would just starve and go thirsty. And sure, the deep forest has wood, but there's no ready farmland. This sets up a foundational historical lesson, showing students exactly why the world's earliest civilizations, think Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, ancient China, why they all grew up alongside rivers.
Moving right along to day 2, the flood. Time to weigh cost versus benefit.
Just as the people are settling into their new river plain home, boom, a frightening twist is introduced. Their beautiful river floods every single spring. Naturally, the first instinct is to panic, right? Floods are dangerous. We need to move the city far away. But the records show a much more nuanced picture. This is a classic human environment dilemma. The students have to weigh the fear and the cost of a predictable spring flood against some pretty immense benefits, namely fertile silt, reliable water, and easy trade.
And this right here, this is the absolute game changer. Double. The records reveal that the nutrient-rich silt left behind by the flood roughly doubles their crop yield. This single piece of data instantly proves why giving in to fear and fleeing the river would be a massive strategic mistake. The scariest option isn't automatically the smartest one. When you have double the food, your city can support way more people and actually thrive.
The teacher key for day 2 maps out the SMART plan perfectly. You don't flee the risk, you use the evidence to harness it. The correct move is to stay by the river, build the city structures just slightly above the usual flood line, and farm that incredibly nutrient-rich floodplain. It perfectly mirrors real history. It shows students exactly how ancient Egypt thrived on the Nile's predictable floods rather than running away from them.
Which brings us to day 3, trade routes. We are talking expansion and connection.
Now our newly founded city is growing, and it's time to establish some everyday trade routes to move goods. Students have to compare 3 distinct options: heading down the river by boat, trekking over the mountain pass, or traveling across the desert by caravan. And once again, they really have to suppress that urge to just pick the most exotic or adventurous-sounding option. Instead, they have to dig into the hard data, looking at speed, cost, capacity, and risk to figure out which route their specific geography actually supports as the everyday backbone of their economy. And the teacher key confirms that the river route is the undeniable winner. It's fast, it's cheap, it carries the most goods, and it poses the lowest risk. The desert might be great for reaching far-off markets eventually, but it's not the daily backbone. Now, what's really cool about this application phase is that students aren't just checking a box. They actually formulate a 5 to 7 sentence founding recommendation. They have to formally advise the council on their chosen site, their flood plan, and their trade route, and then actively connect those choices back to a real river valley civilization.
Finally, let's look at assessing geographic reasoning. It's time to pull back the educator's curtain a bit.
So, you might be wondering, how do you even evaluate a dynamic simulation like this? Well, the grading rubric operates on a super straightforward 3-2-1 scale, from strong down to beginning. It's beautifully designed around the C3 framework standards. It looks at how well the student uses geographic evidence, their human environment reasoning, the completeness of the recommendation, and their historical connections. You aren't just grading whether they stuck a single pin on a correct map location. You're grading their actual geographic reasoning and their ability to back up their choices with cold, hard evidence.
And of course, for classrooms with diverse needs, the lesson naturally builds in differentiated instruction. The scaffolded approach follows 3 key steps. First, you provide sentence frames to guide their writing. Second, you pre-start the comparison tables. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, you ensure the actual judging and reasoning stays entirely with the student. You're never doing the thinking for them.
These scaffolded pages for day 1 and day 2 provide really clear sentence starters, like we choose site X because it has, or the flood cost us X but gives us Y. It's a fantastic tool because it eases that writing and formatting burden for learners who need a little extra support, but it still maintains the exact same rigorous historical analysis and decision-making as the standard student pages.
It all culminates in this capstone reflection, which is really the ultimate proof of learning. The assessment guide notes that educators should look for a student explaining exactly why the grand hilltop or fleeing the flood would have ultimately doomed the city. When a student can articulate that clearly, that's when you know they deeply understand the core lesson. They know exactly why the world's first cities grew where they did.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question to chew on. Are your students merely memorizing history from a textbook, or are they actually reasoning their way through it? This source brilliantly illustrates how a structured, immersive experience with human-environment interaction can completely change how we understand the past, moving us away from rote memorization and straight toward real, critical thinking. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive explainer of the first city. Until next time, keep exploring the evidence,